Okay.
Mhm.
And I welcome everybody who has joined us. We might have some people joining later. Mark sends his apologies because he is in Athens speaking as we speak now on another conference. We always knew that would be the case. We also have some sick people sending their apologies. Update from me today. We've got HTW happening as we speak as well in London. Captain Paddy McKnight is representing us and making sure that we'll have a full report shortly, which is this weekend. Our president is making a big push towards the new principles, approvals and endorsements, and we are getting some success here. So there will be more, no doubt, when we get some substantial and interesting names endorsing our principles. So I'm delighted to report on the work in progress. And from me, I will be in London next week attending the Seafarers Hospital conference, where we are talking about our principles as well and seeing how we can actually improve on the well-being of seafarers. Now, we've got with us SGS today and Lisa and Gert, and very important subject, potable water. And no doubt, I hope we will get some statistics as well, Lisa, from you. You will be able to show us whether Houston, we have a problem or we do not have a problem. Lisa, over to you.
Super. Thank you so much, and really appreciate the opportunity here to talk with the group. Let me share my screen. Can you see?
At the moment, it's gray only.
Okay. Should be coming up.
Okay, here we go. Yes,
Okay.
does ship drinking water meet international standards?
Okay, great. And I'll go off video just so Wi-Fi isn't flaky. All right. So thanks very much for this opportunity. Please stop me if you have questions. I acknowledge the kind support of my colleagues. Gerd Schneider is here with us today. And the question is, does ships drinking water meet international standards? And spoiler alert, the answer is not always, and it depends on what you're looking at. So if you've been at the previous presentation that SGS gave, we talked about our carbon neutral strategy. I won't go over it again, but just want to keep it top of mind since it's so important. And I will note that an addition to this slide is that we are now 10 years on the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices. So the structure of this talk is to provide a review of the drinking water regulations and conventions that we did, and then data that we analyzed from our house, from SGS data. So you're all very familiar with MLC and know that almost all of the world's gross tonnage flags that have ratified that convention. That has refers to drinking water, as does the World Health Organization Guide for Ship Sanitation. It has parameters that are tested, E. coli, temperature, things like that, and it provides typical values that are found on ships. It does not say what methods should be used, and it uses words like should, and it says that analysis should be performed by well-trained professional people with authorized laboratories. Also, the EU Drinking Water Directive was updated and entered into force in 2021. That has some updated standards. And then finally, as we reviewed these various regulations, we're reminded that some flags have their own requirements too, like France and Germany. And when we look across all of these, the one thing that pops out is there's many sources that talk about drinking water, and they're sometimes in conflict in that they do not have the same limit values, for example, for E. coli that should not be exceeded. So what we did to review these regulations is we looked at the 12 largest flags in the world, either by deadweight or having 400 or more ships. And that ended up representing 29 countries. And 83% of them have signed on to the MLC. So these largest flags in the world, no surprise, we know that the MLC is ratified by most countries. And these 12 flags represent 3/4 of all registered ships in the world and 93% of the deadweight tonnage. So if we look at each of these each of these flags, what we find is that 72 of them had regulations that were posted online, which is really helpful, right? We want transparency. We want to know what the regulations are and don't want to have to go on a scavenger hunt to find them, right? Any of us don't want that. Only about 30% referred to drinking water guidelines or prescriptive limits. And that's in conflict with the MLC because the MLC requires states to define guidelines for drinking water limits. So they're not defined within the countries. And only 10% had limits on parameters in drinking water, other than for hot water temperature. And for hot water temperature, 14% of the countries had listed a minimum temperature for hot water. And this is important, as you probably know, to make sure that Legionella, the bacteria that causes Legionnaire's disease, pneumonia, is not able to grow. So you want the hot water hot and the cold water cold. You don't want water that's supposed to be hot not being hot enough, because that can allow this potentially deadly bacteria to grow. So that was the regulation analysis that we did. And then the next step of this is the data that we analyzed. And before we go into it, we should announce a couple of caveats here. First, we should say that the data are biased. Some of the ships had SGS collect the samples, and that means that the owners of those ships exceeded regulations because third-party collection is not required. It's a should, not a shall. So already those ships might meet the limits more often than other ships because they're putting in that extra work, that extra attention to sample collection. So we want to note that. And then if we didn't collect the samples, usually what we see is that the ship will self-collect the samples, which is, you know, allowable in the regulations. The samples get handed off to agents who take them then off into a local laboratory or have a courier take them to a lab. Agents are busy, we all know that. And we've seen a number of cases where the agents get the samples or the samples don't get to the agent in time or don't get to the laboratory in time, and the samples are not analyzed in a timely manner. Each of the analysis has what we call a hold time. For example, for bacteria, typically 8 hours after the samples collected, analysis must proceed. If it does not proceed within that window, the results are unreliable because the method has been validated for that timeline, and the results are invalid. So we'll keep that in mind, and we know that sometimes that happens. All right, so the limits that are placed on parameters in drinking water, bacteria, pH, heavy metals. We want to say that some of them are recommendations for safety. For example, you want a certain level of chlorine, so it reduces microorganisms. Some of them are for taste. Color is analyzed, turbidity is analyzed, and others are for potential health hazards like limits of bacteria. And all of this is going to be described in a paper we're writing now. It will be expanded in the paper, and I'm sure in future longer presentations. All right, and of the data that we've collected so far, I'll show the results from 177 ships that were sampled. And we'll start off with the flags of the ships that we sampled. And we do this because we wanted to ask the question, how representative is this data set of the world fleet? So we have a figure here on the x-axis is the number of data points per flag. For example, number of samples analyzed, over all different types of ballast water drinking parameters. And then of course here on the y-axis, we have the flags. And if this was proportional to the world fleet, you know, at the bottom, we'd have Liberia and then Panama. So we know that it's not, our data are not proportional to the largest flags globally, but it's not that far off because the top 3 flags of the ships sampled are the 8th, 3rd, and 1st in global tonnage. So we just want to understand how representative the data set is of the world fleet. Going on to the data itself, I'll have 3 figures. They're all formatted the same way. X-axis has different parameters that were measured. In this case, E. coli bacteria found in human guts or mammalian guts. The HPC is heterotrophic plate count. It's bacteria that grows in the laboratory at 2 different temperatures. Legionella, we talked about. Enterococci is another bacteria that's found in mammalian guts. And these Enterococci and E. coli are usually indications of contamination, right? On the y-axis is the percent of each of these parameters that was above the recommended limit. And then the numbers on top of the bars are the numbers of samples that were analyzed. So we have a pretty robust data set, hundreds of samples to analyze. So that's encouraging. And what you notice from this graph is that for everything we analyzed, at least in some percentage of the cases, the limits were exceeded. And I should say, because the limits vary across the different regulations, we use the most stringent, I guess I should say, the limits vary across the various guidelines. We use the most stringent limits. For example, for E. coli, everybody agrees when there is a standard that it's less than 1, 0 are allowed in drinking water. Okay, so looking at these data, everything exceeded the limit sometime. And no more than 9% of the time. Still, you don't want bacteria in drinking water, and you really don't want Legionella in your drinking water. The next up is physical and treatment-related analyses. We just kind of group these in a big chunk. This is pH, temperature of cold water, temperature of hot water. Again, that's to knock down bacteria growth if the temperatures are appropriate. Turbidity and color, those affect taste more than anything, and free chlorine, which of course is a product of chlorination to treat the drinking water. You'll see that the scale in this figure is much higher than the last one, right? Up to 100%. And here we have hot water temperature that was not within the limit every time this was measured in 13 samples, so arguably a very small sample size, and this was from 2 ships. And then free chlorine was exceeded, almost 90% of the samples that we analyzed. This may be due to ships that did not have chlorine to meet the limits because they used UV to treat the water rather than chlorine. So it might not be an indication of something that's not treated. So we need to dig into that a little bit more. And then the final graph is the chemical analyses. And again, our percent of samples that were outside the recommended limits is lower here again, highest is 16%. And if we look across these mostly heavy metals, nitrate, trihalomethanes are disinfection byproducts from chlorination. We see that the percentage of times that the samples were outside the limits was relatively low, except for iron, which 14% of the time there was too much iron in the drinking water. And as you know, that's an indication of corrosion in the pipes. There was no instances of copper, cadmium, zinc, aluminum, nitrate exceeding the limits that we analyzed the data for. So that's good news there. So here we go, to 14%. So what are the options for having safe drinking water on board? Just to go over those really quickly, you know them. One is to have plastic bottled water, and that's dependent, of course, on the shore supply. We know it's safe because it's tested, but it's expensive. And of course, it's a plastic waste issue under MARPOL. It has to be accounted for or removed from the ship. And then, there's been a lot of talk about microplastics in ocean waters. And one of the questions about using bottled water on board is after the bottles leave the ship and they're moved to a waste handling facility, what happens to them? Do they end up as microplastics in the ocean, or do they end up recycled or something like that through no action of the ship? It's a downstream effect, but still we know that microplastics are a problem. Shore supply water is an option. This is, of course, dependent on the shore being able to supply it. The quality is tested at the source, but different standards exist across different countries. it could be potentially contaminated on board and sometimes can be expensive. And then the third option is water being produced on board. That can be quality tested. Note that there can be also potential contamination with non-potable water between pipes. So wrapping it up, in conclusion, there is a very great need for global standardized requirements for drinking water, looking at the differences in limits and guidelines across different countries and different flags. EU adopted a new drinking water directive in 2020, and from our data of 177 ships, if we looked at the parameters that we analyzed, there were 21 of them: E. coli, pH, lead. 16 of those had results that were outside of the limits. So we know that there's things in drinking water we don't want in drinking water, basically. Bacteria were less than 10% of the time, but Legionella were above the limit in 6% of the samples we analyzed in this data set. Most of the violations in limit were in water temperature, free chlorine, pH, and turbidity. We should note that those are all short time hold parameters. They have to be analyzed quickly. So part of the problem and the violations of the limits may be due to the hold times being exceeded, and then iron concentrations. So next up for us is we're going to flush this out in a paper, more presentations, and then we're going on to analyze the indoor air quality data that we have. So with that, I thank you for your time and the opportunity, and happy to take any questions. And I think I was within the time. Kuba, 15 minutes? Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yes, Lisa. Yeah. Lisa, you are superb. Thank you very much. Not only time, but quality of this presentation. Wow. Oh no, could you? Yeah, well, okay. Your holding slide is important for us, but it has been recorded now because people need to know how to get in touch with you and so on. I've got a Chris immediately asking questions. I've got several questions here as well. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Kuba, and thank you for the good presentation. It's something I'm passionate about, having been an ex-seafarer myself, and I'm not sure the hair loss had anything to do it, but you never know. But
thank you very much.
One thing that we need to clarify is the actual use of the supplied test kits for on board. Mm-hmm. And also, what periodicity should the test kits be? Are there limits for discoloration? Because that puts seafarers off using, even if the tests are within the categories. I, in my last 3 companies, have supplied 4 mineralizing plants to every vessel, because even the water that's generated on board that is usually a flash evaporator, they come without any minerals. It's basically distilled water. So I've supplied chilling, heating, and remineralizing plants, and supplied a reusable stainless steel bottle for each seafarer on board. And we reduced 52 kilos per vessel of single-use plastics.
Nice.
As a byproduct from it. So there's a lot more can be done, also to encourage the seafarers to use the supplies. And I've also been in the position of taking shore water, and in some locations there's a big difficulty to get a certificate of it being potable water.
I guess I'm not surprised that would vary by place to place, and I appreciate your comments. Yeah. As far as the kits go, what we do is we have the ship provide samples to us, so that isn't part of our service offering. But I see that my colleague Gerd has his hand up, and I'll say that Ursi Zakharopoulou joined us as well from SGS. So hello, and hello to everybody that joined. But maybe Gerd wants to weigh in here.
Yes, sure. I wanted first of all to thank Chris for the great point he made. You are right, Lisa. We are not provider of kits, so this part is not our part. We are the laboratory organization that has the honor to to sample and test, at least following the requirements of WHO, to have one or two independent tests per year as a kind of backup for all these daily kit use or bi-weekly or whatever rhythm the vessel is following. And I would be happy if this question that you have, Chris, would lead maybe to a kind of need for evaluation, independent evaluation of all these different kits and optimization, maybe even optimization for different areas of the world or temperatures and so on, use of vessels, type of vessels. I wanted to add another point on the presentation in general, and that is that from my location here in Hamburg, we have the special situation where we have big shipping companies that still have flags under the German vessels under the German flag, which means they have to follow the German drinking water regulation. And I'm now 5-6 years in this every year routine and having big discussions with them where we see that it makes no sense really to use a regulation that is made in a very developed country with controlled wastewater plants and what you have and try to apply it on a piece of steel sailing in the tropical waters. So what I want to say is that what is absolutely necessary, whatever regulation you are looking at, that these single flag regulations will be adjusted also to the special situation that vessels are in terms of material and contamination sources. So you cannot compare the situation of a nice German building with a 25-year-old vessel sailing between Shanghai and Singapore. And this is a little thing I would like to add as a kind of requirement for the future, to whenever we start to rebuild requirements, that we adjust it to the reality of a vessel's lifetime world and so on. So I just wanted to add this to your problem with the kids, Chris.
Okay, Chris, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would like to, and I appreciate and accept everything Gert has said. However, a seafarer on an old ship deserves as clean water as does someone in a German building.
I was
It's a
thinking the same,
basic
actually,
right of
Gert.
life.
Exactly,
Gert,
exactly.
you know-
It's just, what I want to say is, it's even more important that we do these tests because with the data we can set the ship owner into the position to see his responsibility to act and to react on certain values, for example, to be able to do it, to optimize, at least from his position, the water quality in the right direction. That's what I mean.
Okay,
But
okay, thank you.
I would also suggest that we don't promote the option of single-use plastics in the
Agreed.
current day and age.
Absolutely. Yep.
No, I think that's very clear. Now, coming back to your statistics, because I have to say, first of all, I really appreciate the amount of time and resources you put into it. It's very interesting and definitely an interesting KPI, key performance indicator, showing how we are actually dealing with this issue and problem. Also, I think it was superb to see that you went to check the regulations and showing what is the percentage of the countries and how they actually deal with it. So really, really appreciate that. Thank you. And opening the floor, anybody else, any comments, any suggestions maybe, or your own expertise in this particular area?
Right, and I'll just jump in and say thank you for asking for suggestions, because as we shape up this data, we want it to be useful. So if you have any ideas about what that might look like, please, we'd be happy to hear your recommendations, either now or later by email.
Okay, I see the floor is fairly quiet, so I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Because you are saying that you are preparing the white paper. I think our members would like to see that as well, and we could probably support that, or maybe after reading it and making sure that we are okay with it as well. It would be a very interesting starting point for us. And as you know, we've got our new principles now, and looking into well-being of seafarers. I think that could be a very parallel for our actions. And no doubt I'll be talking about that next week, because I have to say that as a seafarer, I have been affected by the water, and then as a master being a seafarer as well. But I remember my fights, if you wish, to get good water and making sure that we are actually drinking, but also extremely important what you mentioned, hot water for the dishwashers, for example, making sure that actually our dishwashers are up to standard, so we do not spread whatever germs we've got, and so on and so forth. Very, very interesting discussions sometimes with technical superintendents. Chris, I'm nudging you here. But yes, very, very good one. So no doubt we will have some more engagement in that. And I think I would like to thank SGS for being a partner here, and a very proactive partner. So as you can see, we will definitely work with you, because I believe this is the way forward, and hopefully we will be able to get some updates from you. And I wonder whether we could actually, I don't know whether Debbie is actually with us. Yeah, Debbie is. Debbie, maybe something for SMI as well. That's a very good subject, isn't it?
Yes, I can certainly pass the information on to Bob and see what he says. I think they're going to press on the latest edition, so I don't think they'll be able to squeeze it into that one.
No, I think there is no time pressure on that as such, but the subject itself is extremely important, and it should be, well, it shouldn't be controversial, but it is at the moment, I'm afraid. So, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing more questions coming, and I'm just posing for a second. No, thank you. Okay, so just coming back to the InterManager. Okay, Chris, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wondered if I could briefly run through what we did in previous companies, just to fill out the time as well and make use and actually offer some information if wanted.
Yes, Chris, not too long though, because we need to move on, but yes, please. You've got 2
Okay,
minutes.
then we can follow up outside of this later.
Yeah, we could actually. No, and thank you for making this point, because you know what happens at times? People do come back and ask me, who was this guy who was actually da-da-da? And then obviously I put you guys in touch and you talk, because it is extremely important, and that's what the ethos of InterManager is. Then we do members for members. So we've got things which members have already opened the door, so there is no need to reinvent them. Yeah, so by all means, Chris is making a timestamp saying, guys, if you want to know what and how, he's got a first-hand experience and is available. So thank you, Chris,
Perfect.
for that.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Moving on, yes, Lisa, go ahead.
And thanks so much for the offer to work with us on a white paper. Yeah, definitely. We'll take you up on that and talk offline. Thank you.
Very good indeed. Okay, I think that's all from us today. Thank you very much. Please keep in touch. We've got another meeting in 2 weeks' time, and I will be sending very shortly updates for another meetings, as they are now booking themselves, I should say. So I think on the 7th of March, we go as far as 7th of March. If any of these discussions, 60-minute meetings, are inspiration to our members, then please chip in, share with us, demand the floor. This is your area, this is your space. So we would love to see you and speak to you. Anybody, anything else on any other issues? Any directions you would like your secretariat to take? No. Okay, I think that's all from us then. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time, if not earlier anywhere else. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.